Hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon, live from Tacloban Port in the Philippines.
And I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines.
It's 9 in the morning here in Tacloban City in the Philippines.
And it's 1 in the morning here in London. We're broadcasting to viewers around the world. Welcome to Newsday.
And it was Senator Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos talking about the congestion in various ports, and the President of the Philippines, Benigno Aquino, met up with the Mayor of Tacloban City, Alfredo Romualdez, over the past couple of days, and they've been trying now to bridge the differences and coordinate their efforts regarding the relief efforts for it to be able to reach the outlying areas that haven't been distributed yet with medicine, food, and water and shelter. Babita, over to you now in London.
Rico, thank you very much. More from Rico coming up for you in the programme a little later on. Let's just catch up with some of the day's other news for you now. And the Mayor of the Canadian city of Toronto has been stripped of further powers after he admitted smoking crack cocaine and drinking heavily, but he has still refused to step down. Let's cross live now to Toronto and talk to the city's councillor, Denzil Minan Wong. Councillor, thank you very much for joining us. Just tell me, if you will, how did you vote a few hours ago? What do you think the people of Toronto want? Because I presume you would say that this is very embarrassing for the city. I mean, what is your take on it? What would you do if he stays put? Are you going to consider leaving your position? Because, as you've just described, he's not worthy, in your opinion, of being there.
And the embarrassment that he's become.
Sure. Thank you so much for talking us through that. The saga continues. We will watch it to see what else unfolds. But for now, Councillor, thank you very much for joining us. Now, a manhunt is underway in Paris for a gunman who opened fire in 2 locations. Armed with a shotgun, the man seriously injured a photographer in the reception of the French newspaper Libération. Shots were also fired at the headquarters of the bank Société Générale. The BBC's Christian Fraser reports now from Paris. You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Tacloban in the Philippines and here in London. Still to come on the programme. Let's catch up with some of the day's news from across the UK for you now.
This is Newsday on the BBC, live from Tacloban Port in the Philippines.
And I'm Babita Sharma in London. The headlines for you this hour. Now, millions of patients around the world are familiar with the battery-operated device, a pacemaker, which used to help their heart beat regularly. It can be the difference, of course, between life or death. Well, a British charity is collecting the devices when they're removed from dead bodies and plan to send them to developing countries to be used for a second time. The BBC's global health reporter Tulip Mazumdar has the story. Thousands of protesters have clashed with police in 2 of Haiti's biggest cities during demonstrations against the president. Now, Nepal is holding national elections today to choose a special assembly to write a new constitution. More than 100 political parties are competing for votes, all promising prosperity and lasting peace in the country. But many fear that no single party will get a clear majority, and the deadlock that has blighted the country and those reforms will continue. Well, the BBC's South Asia editor Joanna Jolly explained why this election is so significant.
They've been in political impasse for the past 7 years, ever since the Civil War ended in 2006. It started off looking kind of hopeful. Elections were held in 2008 for a constituent assembly to write a new constitution. But within a year, that had all fallen apart, and since then, we've been in political deadlock.
And what is the promise now? Because we know that there are lots of different political parties competing for the votes there. Yet, of course, there are still hardline factions at play, the Maoist Party as well. I mean, is there a sense that this election process is going to be a fair and democratic one?
Yes, I think people are hopeful about the process itself, that it will be fair and democratic, and that the security will be maintained throughout, even though there have been a few incidents of security. There are a lot of parties competing. The big parties that have been in there in the past have been now joined by lots of other smaller parties, so we're unlikely to see a huge majority vote. It's going to be split between a lot of parties.
And therein lies a problem, doesn't it, Joanna? Because people are worried that if it is split, then actually those reforms could almost go back to that deadlock situation where nobody will actually get a final say on pushing through that constitution.
Absolutely. I mean, this is where we've been in the past with a political impasse, because there hasn't been any consensus between all the parties. And as you mentioned, there is a hardline faction that is boycotting the polls already, so they're outside the process, and then you still have to build consensus within the parties that are taking part. And that is looking kind of unlikely. It hasn't happened in the last 7 years, and there's nothing to suggest it's going to happen now. But people are hopeful.
Rico, just some of the people there sharing their thoughts about the devastation where you are. And I know that you're at the port side in Tacloban, where a lot of the aid is finally now coming through.
That's right.
From Rico Zon in Tacloban and me, Babita Sharma in London, you've been watching Newsday. Thank you very much for joining us. Asia Business Report coming your way next. See you soon. Hello there, you're watching BBC News with me, Babita Sharma. The headlines for you this hour.